The Boston Bruins finally suffered their first loss of the season here on Monday afternoon to the Tampa Bay Lightning, but even that loss hit a bit different than we saw last season.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Monday, October 13th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins, well, probably not your first listen today, but most days. And we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today on the podcast, we're going to discuss the loss that we just watched against the Tampa Bay Lightning, a 4-3 defeat at TD Garden against a pretty good Tampa Bay team. We'll discuss kind of what happened, the overall picture, and what's next for the Boston Bruins. As always, the storylines, the stats, and the significance, and a Bruin of the day we'll talk about later on as well. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. I'm a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team and the NHL for various outlets for about 20 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com. and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I think that's everything by way of introduction. It is Thanksgiving up here in Canada, so happy Thanksgiving to those who are celebrating in between right now, Bruins games and the Blue Jays game coming up. It was fairly disappointed with all the results so far yesterday, today. Hopefully the day ends a bit better, but I was thinking about this Bruins game this afternoon, and if you look at the first handful of games on the schedule, you hope for the best against Washington. Yeah, Chicago, Buffalo, winnable games, but then you come to Tampa Bay, and it's one where we can readily acknowledge that the Lightning are projected to be better than the Bruins this season, and for good reason. They're just a better team overall. Now we had the benefit of them not starting Andrei Vasilevsky here today. The Bruins decided to counter with Joonas Korpisalo. I might have gone with Jeremy Swayman just based on how well he has played so far. And the Bruins were just incredibly sloppy to begin this game. They fell behind by a score of 3-0, and all three of those goals to open this game were off of pretty egregious turnovers and play with the puck. Talked so far this season about how Marco Sturm has helped tighten things up. His system is working, but there's still the occasional brain fart there by Nikita Zadorov or Charlie McAvoy or whomever. And a team like the Lightning, you cannot afford to make those kinds of mistakes. Anthony Cirelli with 2 goals in the first. Yanni Gourde made it 3-0 in the second. And the big takeaway from this game for me was that at points last season, if the Bruins were down 3-0, or even when they made it 3-1, we saw Tampa make it 4-1. We saw so many times last season those games get away from the Bruins. And how many times did they come up on the short end of an 8-1 stick or 6-1, just completely lopsided results to teams like Tampa, Florida, Carolina, like the truly good teams in the Eastern Conference. To their credit, the Bruins did not quit in this one, and they battled back to the point where they were able to pull it within 1 goal with pretty much half the game left. Morgan Geekie scored at 11:35 to make it 4-3. That was in the second period. The Bruins kept applying the pressure, kept trying to get that equalizer. They outshot Tampa 10-5 in that final frame. In fact, they had double-digit shot totals versus single-digit shot totals in each of the 3 periods. It was just those terrible turnovers, and a team like Tampa Bay is going to kill you on those. It's going to happen each and every time. Not to mention, just giving up 4 goals to a team like Tampa Bay. The Bruins, we've seen perhaps more firepower than expected so far. We have seen that secondary scoring kick in. Today, we got goals from Casey Mittelstadt, his second of the season in 4 games. Jordan Harris chipped in with a beauty down the wing off the rush by a defenseman. Morgan Geekie with his second goal in 4 games. Pavel Zacha has now 4 assists with a couple in this one. So we're getting kind of that secondary scoring. It's not just the first line that is chipping in, but it's very difficult to come out of a 3-goal deficit in today's NHL, especially against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and even with their backup goalie in net. In fact, Andrei Vasilevsky has been pretty bad so far this season. Now, there were some silver linings. The penalty kill remained perfect. The Bruins still have not allowed a goal on an opposing power play this season, which is just a remarkable turnaround from last year. And at the same time, they do have a positive goal differential. They were well back last year, and they are 3-1 overall. 6 points through 4 games. I mean, that's as good of a start as we could have hoped for out of this team. A lot of that didn't do a full episode on the Buffalo game, but they were able to take advantage of a beat-up Sabres team the other night, I should say, on Saturday. Josh Norris was out. Who else were they missing? Somebody else important. But nevertheless, you can look back and say, well, they only beat Chicago. They only beat Buffalo. Now they come up against a Tampa Bay team that's actually good, and look what happened. But again, the big storyline for me today was the fact that they did not curl up in on themselves. They did not give in. They showed fight right to the very end. And you saw that with David Pastrnak out there making a kick save on an empty net opportunity for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, ill-advised perhaps, because that could easily be a fractured bone in your foot, but still, 4th game of the regular season, and your guy who was not given the C, but to me is the leader of this team, out there doing everything he can to give his team an opportunity to score the equalizer at the other end of the ice, I should say. Now, I did make a comment on Twitter, X, whatever, yesterday about how, and again, it's social media somewhat facetiously, but, I've talked a lot on the podcast about the leadership on this team. And with all due respect to Brad Marchand, you cannot tell me that his contract status last year, whether it be his demands or the Bruins not willing to pay him, back pay for his service, giving him 6 years and whatever Florida gave him. I do think that Nikita Zadorov, Elias Lindholm coming in last season were met up against that core that was already in place of Marchand, Charlie Coyle, Brandon Carlo, not to mention Hampus Lindholm, Charlie McAvoy. With that having been settled, with those, I'm not saying they were negative impacts, but with those guys having been moved out, you're seeing this new core emerge, led by the guys wearing the A's. That's been Pasta, McAvoy, Hampus before he was injured, Elias Lindholm in the last couple games. And you've heard the coaching staff talk about how they're a family, they're hungry. There are fewer distractions than there were last season. And nobody can tell me that the status of Brad Marchand wasn't one of them. Yes, Swayman missing training camp was one of them. The coaching change, injuries, new faces, can't score, can't defend, can't kill penalties, can't convert on power play opportunities. That was all part of it. But for Pasta to be out there making kick saves in the fourth game of the regular season on a Monday afternoon, trying to give his team a chance to tie it at the other end, that to me was different from last season. So even the first loss to me was somewhat encouraging. They're not going to go 83-0 or whatever, to steal the old quote from one of the Richies. Who was it? I can't even remember. But to show that fight to the very end and to not kind of roll over and allow Tampa to just run away with it, which could have easily been done. We saw it many times last season. That was a step in the right direction for the Boston Bruins. They're not Stanley Cup contenders. They're not probably even playoff favorites at this point, but we're seeing signs of progress and signs that things are different than they were last season. And for me, 4 games into this season, that is good enough. To kind of touch on the significance of this game here, but we'll discuss more the stats from this game as well as the overall significance of a 3-1 start with some pretty tough games coming up. We'll touch on all that here as the podcast continues. Look, most people don't even know where their finances are at this very moment. Whether it's 401ks, properties, investments, when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives, and if you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. They do the heavy lifting. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Hey, thanks again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Thank you to those who are watching right now on YouTube as we do this special live vibe right after the Bruins lost 4-3 to the Tampa Bay Lightning. A game that to me was fairly encouraging in the way that they stuck with it. They didn't allow Tampa to run away with things when it was 3-0, 3-1, 4-1. And to his credit, I thought Joonas Korpisalo played pretty well in this one. The Lightning did have the advantage here at 5-on-5 against the Boston Bruins this afternoon. They had 52% of the shot attempts, although Bruins had 22 shots to 19 for Tampa. Scoring chances were 24-14 for Tampa. This is at 5-on-5. And the high danger chances were 13-5 in favor for Tampa Bay. Expected goals were 3.22 to 1.66. So at 5-on-5, Tampa had 66% of the expected goals. In all situations, and again, in this one, the Bruins did get into a bit of penalty trouble, but they did have, and this is where Steve Spott wasn't able to really work his magic, because if they had converted on some of their power plays, they went 0 for 5 in this one, I believe. But having said that, a couple of those opportunities were late in the game, and the Bruins had a 5-on-3 with like 6 seconds left. So that was a tough spot. It doesn't really tell the whole story there in terms of their power play opportunities. They kept Tampa 0 for 2, but the Bruins went 0 for 5. And if they had been able to convert on 1, better yet 2, then it's a whole different game for this team. Unfortunately, they weren't, and that was kind of the difference. Because in all situations, the Bruins had the advantage in shot attempts, 55.7%, 59% of all shots in this game. They only did have 38.1% of the high danger chances. And again, that was created in part by their defensive miscues. The Bruins early on, especially, were just coughing the puck up like, it was turnover day at the bakery. Just a really ugly start, too sloppy. The Bruins could not overcome it. And here we are talking about the first loss of the season for the Bruins. Overall, though, you can't be too mad with their start, I don't think. You look at how they finished last season and how they have started this season, and it's kind of night and day. The roster has been, you could argue, improved, maybe not. But when you look at, I've been thinking a lot about the Bruins to start the season in 2023, 2024. When Bergeron had retired, you had David Krejci gone as well, and that was meant to be a transition season for the Boston Bruins. And you look at the lineup they have now compared to what they had then, a team that did beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs and took Florida to 6 games. Look, they had Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm, healthy, obviously a bonus. Brandon Carlo was there, but they were still relying on a very young Mason Lohrei, who played 41 games that season, Parker Wotherspoon, Matt Grzelcyk, and Kevin Shattenkirk on the blue line. You look at the lineup right now of Lohrei, more mature, with McAvoy and Jordan Harris. You could argue that it's a better group right now than they had a couple years ago. Derek Forbort was still there as well. Ian Mitchell. Andrew Peeke came in later on. If you look up front, obviously you had David Pastrnak leading the way with 110 points that season. You had Brad Marchand with 67 points in 82 games. So, yeah, declining a bit in terms of production. You had career seasons from Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha, and that really lifted the Bruins. Could they get 60 points from Elias Lindholm? Could they get 55 to 59 points from Casey Mittelstadt? Very possibly. You had Trent Frederick and Jake DeBrusk, who both had 40-point seasons that year. Morgan Geekie only at 39. But you had James Van Riemsdyk, Danton Heinen on this team. A very young Matt Poitras, Jesper Boqvist you're relying on, Jacob Lauko. Like, that team a couple years ago that made the playoffs and that pushed Florida to that 6 games, you could argue isn't on paper much better than the team we have before us. And you could argue they've upgraded in certain positions. Ullmark and Swayman is what made that team so good. They both had identical .916 save percentages. If the Bruins can get even just average goaltending from Korpisalo and Jeremy Swayman, you look on paper and compare this team from that team a couple of seasons ago. Look, again, like I said earlier, everything went wrong for the Bruins last year, and that was a big reason why they fell flat on their faces and down to the bottom of the Eastern Conference. But a couple years before that, so many things went right. 40-point season for Trent Frederick, career years for Coyle and Zacha, and that exceptional goaltending. Right now, Jeremy Swayman has a 966 save percentage. I might have started him here today against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Korpisalo, as Charles Martel noted here in the comments, had given up 4 goals on 12 shots at one point. Again, he was hung out to dry like last week's Tighty Whities, and he was clearly angry at one point in this game. Another turnover, he made a save, and he slammed his stick down on the ice. So I wouldn't pin it all on him. But overall, the Bruins, 3-1 to start the season, incredibly encouraging, despite the fact, they beat Buffalo, they beat Chicago. On tomorrow's podcast, I'm going to do my twist on this year's Atlantic Division power rankings. It'll be more of like a bold take on each team, or whatever. Not even a bold take. Like the Buffalo Sabres, these guys are going to be, you're going to have probably Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin asking out at some point this season because they are just BR oodle. But that's a teaser for tomorrow. For today, the stats show the Bruins put up a good fight against Tampa. They weren't able to capitalize on their power play opportunities. They gave up way too many high danger opportunities because of turnovers. If they can clean that up a little bit, this team could very well be in the playoff mix. They do have a very challenging week coming up, and we'll discuss what that's going to look like, as well as anoint today's Bruin of the day here as the podcast continues. The NFL and NHL seasons are well underway. The baseball playoffs full effect as well. Getting ready to watch today's Blue Jays Mariners game, and FanDuel has an offer you do not want to miss if you are an avid sports watcher. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bucks if you win. That's right. Just pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. People love using FanDuel because it gives them so many ways to play. You can build parlays, try player props, even follow the live lines during games. Makes watching football even more exciting. Same with hockey and baseball playoffs when you've got a little something riding on the action. So whether you're a casual fan or love diving into stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Place a $5 bet, and if it hits, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. All right, I'm recording this one live after the Bruins lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Forgive me if you can hear some screaming in the background. That would be our 13-year-old playing Clash Royale, which is apparently the hot game of the day. Now, the Bruins this week, pretty challenging schedule. Not going to lie. They are heading out west right now, or later on today, where they will visit the Vegas Golden Knights on Thursday. They're off for 2 days. Vegas, Thursday evening at 10 p.m. Eastern. Then they will travel to Colorado to take on the Avs next Saturday. And then right back to it on Sunday, the 19th, with the game in Utah against the Mammoth. And not to get too ahead of ourselves, but you look towards next week, doesn't get much easier. They'll come home after this 3-game road trip to host Brad Marchand and the Florida Panthers. Then a game against the Ducks, who could be a bit better this season, and the Avs, before getting a bit of a reprieve to end October with games against the Senators, Islanders, and the lowly Sabres. So to get those 6 points early on was pretty big for this team. This is going to be a big test for them coming up because we all know Bruce Cassidy's Golden Knights are going to be a tough challenge. We all know Nathan McKinnon, Martin Necas are very unstoppable at the moment. And we know that even Utah looks like they could be challenging for a playoff spot this season. So It's good to get those points in the bank. And despite losing here today, it was nice to see them at least put up some fight to get back into this one. And, they were right in it until the very last second. Pasta kicking out the empty netter, them trying to get some pucks on net to get that equalizer. If they had gone out on this road trip after losing 7-1 instead of 4-3, the vibes would be a bit different. Now, again, this is not to paint a picture that this is a high efficiency team at the moment, but you cannot compare this team to last year and not be at least a bit more encouraged about their prospects and excited for what we could see this season. And speaking of what we could see this season, haven't talked a lot about the kids who were sent down since training camp, but on Saturday or Sunday, I should say, we got some really good stats from Providence where Fabian Lysell recorded a hat trick and an assist to lead Providence past Charlotte by a score of 6-3. Alex Steeves also had 4 points. Matt Poitras had 4 assists. Patrick Brown, Matej Blumel also found the back of the net in the victory. Brown, I'm not too concerned about, but to get huge performances out of Lysell, Poitras, Steeves, Blumel, those are great signs for the Bruins because let's be honest, at some point this season, these guys are going to need to be called up, whether it be due to injury, perhaps trades, or just straight up ineffectiveness by some of the guys on the lineup or on the roster. Jeffrey Viel, we haven't even seen him once this season. Why is he on the roster when you could have some of these younger guys coming in and out, maybe spot Mikey Asimont or Marcus Stelic? I don't get it. And I could easily see a situation where VL's sent down as the Bruins go on this road trip because the news is Hampus Lindholm was not able to play Saturday, wasn't able to play today, but he, I believe, will be traveling with the Bruins out west, but they might want to bring an extra defenseman just in case he is not able to suit up. But the Bruin of the day for today, Fabian Lysell, because of that fantastic performance yesterday. And I would still love to see a lot of these young guys coming up and making a contribution. And I'm sure they will because obviously the roster will not stay exactly as it is for the entirety of the season. Anyways, that is it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. Thank you so much for joining me live on YouTube or wherever you're listening to on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Please do subscribe if you have not done so already. Please check out the Locked On NHL Game Night podcast next. Every game, every night, analysis until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Yes, your team every day. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you again here on tomorrow's episode. And also go Blue Jays. And thank you for joining me here on Locked On Boston Bruins. Subscribe if you have not already, please, on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Pocket Casts is what I use. And on YouTube. It would be very, very much appreciated. That would make my Thanksgiving. All right, guys, have a great rest of the day. We'll talk to you again here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins.